Welcome to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. Sorry for the lack of a USC background. Got on here and couldn't find anything. Maybe that's a metaphor for USC's season after the loss to Oregon, falling short of the college football playoff. But it's Matt Zemek with Crashlet Collier coming to you during UCLA week. Sunday was for Oregon and it was painful, but tonight it's the UCLA preview show. So our last regular season game preview, of course, we will have a bowl game preview, whatever that might be. We'll find out on the first Sunday of September after the playoff reveal comes. But this is UCLA week. It's time to get the victory bell, and it's time to play a really good game against the Bruins. USC won last year, but that was a difficult watch. That was a hard game to sit through with all those red zone failures at the end of a really miserable season for USC. And of course, 2 years ago, Caleb Williams and the gang got dump trucked by a UCLA defensive coordinator named Danton Lynn. So it's time for USC to really bring it to the Bruins, and with Nico Iamaleava out, decent chance of that happening. So Crash, we'll get into a lot of different UCLA angles. But first off, just like, what is the meaning of UCLA week to you as a Trojan, as a USC fan? What does this week right here mean to you, and your life, your experiences? Like, take us through the journey, take us through the experience.
Well, Matt, for me, it's really just about just showing UCLA that they don't run LA. It's USC's town. We run LA. So really, it's just about securing the just ultimate bragging rights for who LA belongs to. I mean, it's always USC regardless, but to just have, just it confirmed every year on the gridiron, take home the victory bell, get to paint it Cardinal if it isn't already. That's just really what it means. And also, I think just really, it's just you can tell that this game means something a little different. It doesn't just mean a little bit more. It means a lot more to fans. Maybe possibly, depending on who you ask, maybe the only game that rivals this kind of hate and meaning is the Notre Dame game. But I think in this game, it just shows, like, fans come into it differently. Like, just the hate's going around. Obviously, just USC having to wrap up all the statues, all that. Same with UCLA on their campus, boxing up their bear, all that stuff. And then also just the way fans are kind of, going – USC fans are going fours down anytime they see someone in that ugly shade of blue, and then had to, and then also just even just the game itself. And I think one of the things I really love about this game is that they allow the teams to both wear their colors. I think it was a genius move by Pete Carroll to just basically give the NCAA the finger and say, "Oh, we only get charged a timeout," and just have a gentleman's agreement with UCLA to also call timeout. So I do kind of love how, for one moment, USC and UCLA did work together to bring back something that just also makes this rivalry super unique, in that both teams wear their colors. And it makes for great contrast, whether you're watching it at either the Coliseum or the Rose Bowl, or even if you're just watching it on TV. I think it makes for an amazing contrast.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, you wonder why more schools don't do this, right? You wonder why Ohio State and Michigan don't do it. You wonder why, let's say, Penn State and Wisconsin don't do it. I mean, just imagine if we normalized double home uniforms throughout college football. Like, wouldn't that be great? I don't remember this, but going through Rose Bowl history, for example, and mentioning UCLA upset Ohio State in the 1976 Rose Bowl. They were both wearing home uniforms. UCLA wore the powder blue and Ohio State wore its red tops. Like, why don't we do that all the time? And next year, 2026, while we're on this particular subject, since USC and UCLA are the industry leaders in this regard, doing double home unis, which the rest of the sport should be doing but isn't. Next year, if USC and Notre Dame can assign a deal, they're going to be playing at the Coliseum next year. It's an even numbered year, 100th anniversary I've been talking to, the Notre Dame media people in my circles that, hey, we need to have Notre Dame wearing a green top, USC wearing the cardinal top in the Coliseum. Like, wouldn't that just be the perfect way to celebrate 100 years of Notre Dame USC? So, I wish Jen Cohen and Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bavacqua could get on that. Well, obviously, first they need to ink the deal, get that done. But then, if that game is officially on, double home unis for USC Notre Dame. We just got to have that. So double home uniforms, USC and UCLA, just one of the most aesthetic rivalries, not just in college football, but in sports. And actually, we'll try and show you some classic photos later in the show, part of this special UCLA episode here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. So I alluded to Notre Dame. You briefly alluded to Notre Dame a little bit. Let's just talk about the difference. USC's two big rivalries, UCLA, Notre Dame. How are they the same? How are they different? How would you characterize each rivalry? What's similar? What are the common threads? And what's different? What's unique about each of these feuds involving USC?
Well, I think if you talk to a lot of people, and especially having interviewed Petros Papadakis over the summer on my podcast Behind the Caution Tape, I think what kind of came across clear from that one, especially him being an alum of the USC program, is it seems like that rivalry might just mean a little bit more than the UCLA one. I think especially with both those Notre Dame having kind of more tradition and history compared to UCLA, it kind of seems like that's kind of one where I guess there's kind of a bit more mutual respect. And that's kind of what I came to realize when I was in South Bend this year for the game against the Irish. But it kind of, while that one might have more hate involved, even with between the Trojans and the Irish, the one what's interesting about the UCLA rivalry is that one kind of encompasses all sports. Like anytime USC and UCLA are playing, it's generally going to draw crowds. I saw this especially since I saw kind of basketball, volleyball, baseball, water polo, you name it. I've seen a lot of those, just how it plays out. And there's just, I think kind of there might be just more collective hate for UCLA, especially with the proximity of about 10 miles between the campuses. And then also just they play each other in all sports. They're always in the same conference, even going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, and even the sports that when their sports aren't sponsored by their main conference, they always typically wind up in the same conference, which is typically the MPSF for those smaller sports. But that is not to say, though, that with Notre Dame, when the Trojans and Irish face in another sport, and the example that comes to mind is women's basketball, given the teams just completed a home-and-home series, is the hate builds up for those two, I kind of feel. Especially, I saw it firsthand when I was at Galen Center last year for when the Irish came to town, and it very much seemed that same way when I was watching that game last week on TV. So it's not to say there isn't hate for the other sports, but because USC doesn't play Notre Dame in other sports on this like they do for football, it kind of seems like there's more kind of collective hate around all sports for UCLA.
If you had to pick, obviously you want to win both, but if you had to pick, Crash, each year, would you rather beat UCLA? Would you rather beat Notre Dame? We all remember what it feels like to beat Notre Dame, to beat UCLA. Is the feeling of euphoria after beating UCLA the same as after you beat Notre Dame? Does it feel a little bit different? Go through that particular experience of being a Trojan.
That's kind of a tricky one for me to answer, Matt, because I've seen the Notre Dame rivalry at both the Coliseum and Notre Dame Stadium, and I've seen USC and UCLA play off in numerous sports, both at USC and at UCLA, as well as in a handful of neutral sites like Las Vegas. So it's kind of a tricky question for me to answer, just given how kind of, I guess you could say, invested I've gotten into a lot of sports and not just necessarily football, basketball, some of the other kind of big sports. But I think I feel like, kind of the Notre Dame wins are just satisfying, especially just the last time USC won was in the Coliseum when Caleb Williams won the Heisman. That might have been one of the most electrifying atmospheres I've ever experienced at the Coliseum. And I've yet to see UCLA or USC beat UCLA in the Coliseum. since I've started going to games since my freshman year, which was 2021. I'm 2-2 in USC UCLA football games, with the road team winning each time. But I think I feel like kind of maybe because I've kind of gotten into everything, maybe the UCLA wins might mean a little bit more, but that's not to say that I don't also really enjoy the one time I've seen in person USC beat Notre Dame.
Do you have like a favorite, best friend story, or I mean, you might not work in an office, but I'm sure you know people who do. Angelinos just living right next to each other, and one has to live with the other for 365 days, and one side gets bragging rights and the other doesn't. You have any war stories in terms of friends, family members? Being split by this USC UCLA rivalry?
The main one that comes to mind, I've had a few classmates who, like, from high school and stuff, or even a few friends from my hometown and all that, who have gone or are at or have gone to UCLA. The main one that actually comes to mind is my cousin, who went to UCLA. And while it's generally we don't talk too much about it, oftentimes after the game, or like we'll usually be texting each other about, and kind of, whoever wins will kind of talk a bit of trash on the other, kind of be like, oh yeah, that's our town, Main time though we really go after each other though is whenever we post something like I think was related to when we both got in and graduated from our respective schools. Like we'd be like, congrats, but fight on, or he'd be like, congrats, but fours up, or fight off. So that sort of thing is kind of like, we get a little, I guess, chirpy with each other in the comments of our Instagram posts is kind of, I guess, a way you could put it.
Yeah, and like this matters to Angelinos, and one wonders what the rest of the nation thinks of this rivalry, because, and we're going to talk about favorite USC UCLA games later in the show, but just to make the bigger point, UCLA has been so irrelevant in football for so long. And on one hand, from a USC standpoint, it's got to be great. UCLA really does suck. Like, it's not just a slogan, it's reality. So, it's nice to see little brother down bad. But on the other hand, it's great when this rivalry cooks. It's great when this rivalry sizzles, and like there's a lot on the line for both teams. So like that's kind of a paradox, right? You want UCLA to suffer, but you want the Bruins to be good enough that each time USC plays UCLA, it feels like a really huge one. And this Saturday, like, folks, I don't feel like going deep into the X's and O's because there's no Nico Iamaleava. Like, UCLA is just dead meat in this game. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the game, but USC is like a 21-point favorite, minus 2,000 money line. Like, this is not expected to be close. But talk about that tricky balance. You've kind of alluded to how it's sometimes hard to thread the needle in terms of describing this rivalry and what it means. You want UCLA to suffer, but you want UCLA to be good to a certain extent, right? Or no, you'd like to see UCLA be 2-10 every year. How do you come at that particular tension point, Crash?
It's a really interesting point you bring up, Matt, because on the one hand, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, every week, like, we pray as USC fans, we pray for a perfect weekend. USC wins, UCLA, Notre Dame lose. But this also kind of applies to Notre Dame as well as any other sport where USC faces UCLA in a big rivalry game. Is there's a part of you, I think, that wants UCLA to be good. Not because you want them to, because in a perfect world, you'd obviously you're praying for their downfall. But that part of you wants them to be good, and not even like just decent, but like honestly great, because then it just makes for a better game, more entertaining. There's more hype around it. People then around the country start talking about it. So it just makes it a much more exciting game. And my case in point is the USC UCLA game in 2022 at the Rose Bowl, which I think was just such a thrilling game when you just saw Caleb Williams and Dorian Thompson-Robinson trading blows. And it was just, such a thrilling game that was just like, that's what you want to see. You want to see a big rivalry game that's just with both teams that you're left really just like, it's one of those games like where we talk about where it's like that could have been one of those games where maybe USC doesn't win, but it's like, you know what? It was such a great game. You were just still like, that was just an amazing experience to witness. Like, so I think there's that part of me that wants to be great, honestly. And I apologize, that's a bold take that flies in the face of everything we as Trojans want. But I think it just makes for just much more entertaining and exciting games. And that's why I kind of, on the one hand, want UCLA to do well. And I think you see that in some of the other sports, especially like women's basketball the last few years, where just those games have just been such thrillers all the way down to the final buzzer.
We turn back to the present moment in this game, and again, USC a massive favorite. Crash, like, would you be disappointed if USC just kind of slogs through and wins by 10 or 11 points? Like, is it really important from a USC perspective, a USC fan perspective? We got to drag them through the mud. Like, now maybe it won't be 2005 or those other ultimate Pete Carroll beatdowns at the Coliseum when USC would, hang a score in the 50s or the 60s against the Bruins, but like need to beat them by at least 30 to feel like you got your money's worth in the Victory Bell game this year. Like how important is it to absolutely just pound UCLA into the ground?
Well, I think for this year, Matt, when you talk about a year where I think once UCLA is kind of bad, then that's kind of when you're just like, then you want to see the beatdowns. If it's like, once they've shown they're at mid or less than mid, you just want to see a beatdown, I think is my opinion of it. Especially with just, UCLA was, the talk of college football for 3 weeks. Obviously, there's nothing again. Obviously, Nico Iamaleava is a super talented player. He is the lone reason why UCLA has those 3 wins at all, especially considering he is their leading rusher. But especially when you factor in that he is out of this game, you just want to see USC do something to UCLA like the 50-0 game or just some of those just absolute beatdowns that we've seen throughout history.
Yeah, and so, without Nico Iamaleava, I mean, UCLA has been absolutely helpless. The Bruins, they've been getting their doors blown off on a routine basis, and it's been ugly. At Ohio State, Washington last week, when Nico got hurt midway through the game, like it has been absolutely a disaster for UCLA. So when we consider that particular part of this. Are you expecting this game to be over in the second quarter? Or are you expecting UCLA to put up any sort of fight early? Like how much of a blowout are you looking at in this game?
Well, I think if USC can just have a really fast start, I think this game can be over quickly. Otherwise, we could be looking at what we've seen from USC in some of its recent games, especially against Nebraska, Northwestern, and Iowa, where maybe they struggle to start, but then they kind of take off in the second half. Because we've very much seen this team be a second half team where they play much better. But the problem is but fortunately for them, it works in a game like UCLA. That said, though, if USC can play like how they've been playing, Jade Mayava plays like the player we know him to be. Makai Lemon has it, and Makai Lemon basically shows why he deserves the Biletnikoff Award. This game can be over by halftime, especially with him being named one of 3 finalists earlier today.
Yeah, I mean it's been that kind of a journey for UCLA, and as we consider just how much the wheels have fallen off the wagon for this team, part of this story for UCLA, as we consider the Bruins drift into irrelevance, is the fake field goal. We have to talk about the fake field goal against Washington. And just look at this picture. Just look at this picture here. Pull it up just a moment. Okay, having trouble pulling it up, but well, we remember that play from the UCLA game against Washington. If you were staying up late to watch it, and it was, on some fake field goals, a team will try to do a blind flip. The holder takes the ball, and instead of just setting it down, he blindly flips the ball over his shoulder. And UCLA tries the blind flip over the shoulder. The ball doesn't even come close to the field goal kicker. Like it was the throw didn't miss him by like a foot or two. It missed him by like 4 or 5 yards. Washington scoops up the blind over the shoulder flip from the holder, takes it the other way for a touchdown. Like that symbolizes UCLA's season. It symbolizes where the Bruins are as a program. Like they've hit rock bottom. They've just been getting dusted. Indiana beat them by 50. Ohio State beat them by over 30 points. Washington beats them by 34. And Washington has been a bad road team. Washington scored just 7 points at Michigan. Washington scored just 3 points in the first 3 quarters of its game at Maryland before rallying in the fourth quarter. Washington lost at Wisconsin. A game it was like favored by almost 2 touchdowns, but at UCLA, Huskies win easily by 34. So, like USC is not playing 2023 UCLA. That 2023 UCLA team wasn't especially good, but it wasn't terrible, and it had a defense that was playing pretty consistently every week. It's not the same with this UCLA team. So, is there anything at all about this UCLA team that makes you the slightest bit concerned, just in terms of winning, not in terms of covering the 20.5 point spread, but just in terms of winning the game? Is there any way a UCLA team without Nico can even remotely threaten USC for, even 20 minutes, let alone 60?
Well, it's hard to see it, Matt, especially when you just look at that. Like I said earlier, Nico Iamaleava was the one reason they won those games. And if you look at, well, maybe not so much the Maryland game, that was a bit lower scoring relative compared to some of those other games they won. But the Penn State and Michigan State games, maybe Michigan State, that one they did all right, but then Michigan State is also not playing very well. But like the Penn State game comes to mind, where that was pretty much, they just had the fake onside kick really early in the game. And I mean, and that's one of the reasons what upsets me about the new kickoff rules in the NFL is you can't just have that element of surprise at the most random time, which I do credit them, was kind of a smart play. But then after that, after they were able to get a bit up ahead, they just basically held off Penn State. And then every time the Nittany Lions scored, Nico and the offense countered back. So it really just shows just how crucial Iamaleava was to all 3 of UCLA's wins, especially that Penn State win where it was just a full shootout at the Rose Bowl. So I think just when you really look at now that he's out, I don't really see much concern for USC, given that he was the one big playmaker that they had both through the air and on the ground.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that when UCLA had that 3-game winning streak, its offensive line played pretty well. So I would say if there's any small chance that UCLA can do anything of note in this game, its offensive line has to play well against the USC defensive line, which, has struggled, certainly had a difficult game last week against Oregon. So, to me, from a USC standpoint, I'm thinking the defensive line is the most important part of this game. Not in terms of winning, but in terms of winning big and, eliminating the drama from this game. If UCLA is going to keep it close, it has to be with its offensive line against USC's defensive line. Are you pretty much of the same mindset there, or are you looking at perhaps the offense? Or are you looking at some other aspect of USC going into this game?
Well, I think I agree with you that it needs to be the defensive line. And if Iamaleava was playing, then I think maybe my concern would possibly possibly shift more into the backfield when you look at maybe the secondary and its struggles, or especially the linebacker room. Something that usually always comes up on our shows for the past 2 months, ever since USC first took a loss. And just, I think then maybe I'd be more concerned about the secondary and linebacker rooms. But I think without Nico Iamaleava in the picture, it then becomes about just really suffocating that offensive line and just whatever UCLA's offensive attack that Jerry Neuheisel is trying to plan up in this game. So I think really it's like you said, I do agree with you, because of the fact that Iamaleava is out of the game, that the defensive line is going to be the most important area that will help USC win this game.
All right. And I think that the biggest storyline of this game, because, winning, I don't think is going to be an issue. Like, winning is not going to be a question or a problem. The biggest storyline of this game, and if you haven't noticed it or picked it up in the news today, Tuesday, as we record our show here on the USC channel, The Voice of College Football, if you didn't already know it, and you probably do, but if you don't, Makai Lemon was named one of the 3 finalists for the Biletnikoff Award, given to the best receiver in the Football Bowl subdivision, major college football. The other 2 finalists, Skylar Bell from UConn and Jeremiah Smith of Ohio State, who might be the top receiver picked in the draft. But the Biletnikoff Award is not about the top receiver picked in the draft. It's about the best receiver in college football. I saw in the past week, Nick Saban said, I have not seen a better receiver in the nation all year than Makai Lemon. So, Crash, USC fans, they want to run the damn ball, but I'm thinking in this game, squeeze the lemon. The lemon needs to be juiced up for this one, baby. Give him as many catches as he wants. Let's get him over 200 yards receiving. Let's get him several touchdowns so that there's no mistake. Let's get him over the line. Like Lincoln Riley, this team, this offense, it's about helping Makai Lemon seal away this Biletnikoff Award.
For sure, Matt. And Sean White, I think, once said it best, where if you want to win something, you can't just be better. You have to be blatantly better. And obviously, especially with the storyline of Ohio State, they're playing for an undefeated regular season. They're going to the CFP, barring, I don't see any situation where they don't make it, even if they lose to Michigan and then likely Indiana. But really, what I think is, because of that, you're absolutely right. If Makai Lemon wants to be the blatantly better than Jeremiah Smith, he's got to rack up a bunch of yards, like you said, 200 at least, and get it 2 to 3 touchdowns, and basically just lock up the award and just leave no doubt at all. And especially, I saw what Saban said. And I mean, that does help. I think that especially the greatest college football coach of all time is singing Lemon's praises, but Lemon now has to go prove it out on the field. So I think Saturday, especially against this really not so solid UCLA team, I think it's a great opportunity for him to just basically lock up the award.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea of, we need to get the ball to this one guy to fatten up his stats, it might seem amateurish. I would say that, if Jacoby Lane's wide open, you got to throw him the ball. But to the extent that you can game plan and you can create routes, you can create packages that put Makai Lemon in the best position to succeed, USC ought to be able to do that. Since the Biletnikoff Award really is now an even bigger deal, since USC is not going to be in the playoff, what would you say, when we're all going to watch Ohio State, Michigan on Saturday, winning can't just be enough. If Ohio State wins an ugly 17-10 grinder over Michigan, that doesn't mean Jeremiah Smith's better or more deserving. He needs to go off just to catch up to Makai Lemon to make this a conversation. How would you just genuinely rate this race between Jeremiah Smith and Makai Lemon? Do you think it's a dead heat? Do you think it's really close? Do you think Lemon is clearly ahead? And we know that Ohio State, Michigan gets so much media attention. And this ironically touches on something we've mentioned earlier in the show, that UCLA stinks. There's no Nico. Like, people around the country, they're not going to all be focused on USC, UCLA. They're going to be watching the other games that have playoff ramifications in the middle of the afternoon, but they're all going to be watching Ohio State, Michigan on Fox Big Noon. So, because of that media angle, anything Jeremiah Smith does well will be magnified. So how close do you think this Biletnikoff Award race truly is?
I think Lemon's ahead right now, especially when you look at it statistically. He's got the most receiving yards of any receiver in the country. But I think, like you said, Matt, you touched on a big thing. Michigan, Ohio State, given the playoff ramifications for both teams, not just the Buckeyes, but Michigan's trying to keep their playoff dream alive. I think, Jeremiah Smith clearly does have the bigger platform. Obviously, USC, UCLA, it's on NBC, so it's not like it's been buried on the Big Ten Network at the worst possible time at 8 p.m. on a Saturday when all the East and Central time zones are asleep. But it still shows that Jeremiah Smith is going to have a big platform. But I still think, regardless, Makai Lemon should win. And obviously, we talked about, if, Jacoby Lane's wide open, give him the ball, or even even still run the ball too. Don't just make it just don't give it always to Makai. That's going to be too obvious, and then that will probably hurt him. But really, just to the extent that USC can, is they need to put Makai Lemon in the best position to where it's just they leave no doubt at all that he's the guy. And I think Bob Springer said it best in the chat just now. He said Jeremiah Smith has a huge platform on Saturday with Michigan. And that's like you said, it's absolutely correct that there's going to be way more eyes on this game given the time and the implications. But I still think Lemon should win it. But it's just he basically is going to just need to prove that he's basically just got one more game to prove that what he does is more impressive than Smith. And I think playing UCLA gives him a great opportunity to do that.
I'm just noticing we got a upgrade in our graphics here. Maybe that's why we don't have the USC Primetime Live graphics at the top, because things are changing internally in terms of our presentation here. Like, that looks really snappy, but that might explain why I couldn't find the USC Primetime Live banner at the top of the screen. Anyway, we have a lot more coming at you on this show. Bob Springer asked, is Iamaleava out for sure? Well, USC being favored by 20.5, that would reflect a firm belief, among the sports books that Nico's not here. Because if Nico was, this line would not. If Nico was playing, this line would not be anywhere close to 20.5. It might be maybe 12, 13. So there's a strong belief that Nico is out. On the off chance that he plays, I would expect some significant line movement. But I think the firm expectation is, Nico, this is not his first concussion. This has happened repeatedly this season. So I'm sure that, in consultation with the family, that we don't want to endanger him any more than we have. We got to protect him. We got to think about his long-term future. Obviously, UCLA not playing for a bowl game or anything related to the postseason. So, Bob, I would say it's 99.5, 99.9% that he's out. I would be absolutely stunned, genuinely stunned, if Nico is playing in this game. And again, the betting lines, we're not encouraging you to bet. I'm just saying that the betting lines are often a gauge of what the expectation is in terms of which key players are and aren't playing, and the betting lines are pretty firm and clear. They do not expect Nico Iamaleava to be playing in this game. All right, so we have a lot more coming at you on UCLA week, the USC-UCLA game here at the Voice of College Football. But first, we have a word from our sponsors, so we'll see you in a minute.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the voice of college football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And we remind you that Mark Rogers' national show here at the Voice of College Football, 6 nights a week, Mondays through Saturdays, 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in Los Angeles, and the rest of the West. That's right here at the Voice of College Football. How to support the USC channel. Go to vocfb.com/shop. You know, Ethan's not here, but Ethan's rocking that camo cap with the USC branding. You get any cap or piece of merchandise from the VOCFB shop with the USC label on it, that supports the USC channel. All the different elements of merchandise you see there, plus more. You can go around and play around with the VOCFB shop. And then the other thing that you can do to support our channel here at the Voice of College Football, you go to our YouTube homepage, USC at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. There you go. You click that join button in the middle. You get the pop-up. You get that middle Heisman tier or that top national champion tier. You get the exclusive insider access to bonus cuts. Bring your fork and knife, folks. Bonus cuts. And I'm going to announce it right here, since it is UCLA week and it's also Thanksgiving. We have a special bonus cut for you. Cody Kessler, former USC quarterback, Crash, Ethan, and myself, we're all going to participate in a conversation with noted USC Trojan quarterback Cody Kessler. So that's going to be a bonus segment. So you want to be a member, you want to watch the segment with Cody Kessler, the middle Heisman tier, the top national champion tier, that gets you the exclusive insider access here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. All right, so as we continue, let's just enjoy some USC UCLA memories and some photos. So just look at this. Classic USC UCLA 1967, the greatest USC UCLA football game of all time. OJ, that amazing electrifying cutback run, which, and Reggie Bush almost exactly retraced that path. The OJ run path in 1967 against UCLA, Reggie Bush carved out nearly the same path in that 2005 game over Fresno State at the end of the regular season. But there's OJ, UCLA, and the old 1960s powder blues. Just so much fun here. There's 1969. You see that 100 logo on the helmet? That's 1969 because that was the 100th anniversary of the sport of college football. Princeton and Rutgers played the first college football game in 1869. So in that 1969 season, every team, not just USC, had, or at least most teams, had that 100 logo on the helmet. So Jimmy Jones right there in 1969. And this is one of my favorite USC UCLA photos ever. Just, the mid to late afternoon in Los Angeles, late November, such a crisp photo. And it's a reminder that, this game's going to be a day game. USC UCLA needs to be a day game every time because you get the glorious sunshine. You get these brilliant photos on the double home uniforms. It's just such a radiant photo. And there is Ricky Bell, USC legend, doing his thing, leading USC to the win in 1976, which, won the Pac-8 conference, sent USC into the 1977 Rose Bowl. The Trojans beat Michigan, finished number 2 in the country. And this was, of course, John Robinson's first season as USC head coach after John McKay left to go to the NFL and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And of course, Ricky Bell had a reunion with John McKay in Tampa Bay with the Buccaneers. Ricky Bell, an all-time great. And that's just one of the top USC UCLA photos for my money that you'll ever find. And speaking of John Robinson, there he is in all his majesty. Look at that tracksuit, the Sansabelt pants. You see the USC staffers in the background. What a different time. What a different kind. But those colors pop. Another vivid photo. John Robinson, iconic USC coach, kept it going after John McKay. And there, in all his glory, Charles White, making a UCLA defender miss. Just these two schools with the most aesthetic uniforms in college football, playing at the Coliseum. And like you can tell, like the seats at the Coliseum in the late 1970s, they just kept going. You had over 90,000 in the place. They didn't have sections walled off. They didn't have the renovations that we've had recently. Charles White running through the UCLA defense in 1979. Vince Evans from that 1976 game, you'll notice it's going toward the east end of the Coliseum field. So that's the similar sunshine angle as the one that we have with Ricky Bell a little bit earlier. So just again, this game pops in daytime. You need those double home uniforms in daytime. That slanting mid to late afternoon sun in Los Angeles, just so beautiful. And here you see, look at that old style helmet protector between the eyes. And of course, you can see the 100 logo on that helmet. So it's Clarence Davis against UCLA in 1969. And of course, all the players are in shadow, but the crowd in the background is in sun. Just another stunning visual from the Los Angeles Coliseum. So hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane with some classic USC UCLA game photos. In the comments, in the chat, our friend Bob Springer has been looking at favorite USC UCLA games. So let's just bring these up to honor Bob's contributions here. So 1967, 69, beating the White Shoe Bruins in 1973, Jordan and 29-27 in 1977. That's Frank Jordan, one of the great clutch kickers in UCLA history. And then 1981, future NFL kicker Norm Johnson was on UCLA. He lined up for a game-winning kick, but USC was able to block that kick, and the Trojans won that game. They went to the Fiesta Bowl to play Joe Paterno and Penn State. Lots of memories there. Bob continues. Eric Affolter, great callback from 1987, 1988. Chad Morton, Antoine Simmons, Dickerson, free pizza in 2002 with Carson Palmer. And then, of course, Crash, you can recall some earlier games. So let's now segue into your favorite USC, UCLA games, your favorite memories, and also the games that, USC family members, friends have told you about from the earlier years, decades of this series.
So main game that comes to mind when I think about just like that friends and family have told me about, especially having interviewed Roy Newaser, better known as the USC Psycho, who is, I think, gone to 30 plus. I think it's 35th year, over, I think, 400 consecutive games, home or away. Doesn't matter where, he's going to be there with his tailgate setup. One that him and a lot of people always tell me about is the 50-0 game. So that's kind of one that I kind of think about that was kind of before my time, that a lot of people always remember very fondly of, especially considering it was a shutout against UCLA. But for me, so far I've only got, since I've been a USC fan since my freshman year, this will be my 5th game coming up this weekend. I'm 2-2 so far. So the main game there that comes to me is the one I mentioned earlier in the show when I talked about kind of why sometimes I want UCLA to be good because then it just makes for a better matchup, especially when USC is also good. And there's a lot of, implications for either the conference or national championship race implications. So like I said, that 48-45 game at the Rose Bowl in 2022, I think really stands out to me because that was my first ever away game too, as the away football game as a USC fan. So that was my first time. I drove like a handful of my friends. We pulled up to the tailgate. It actually happened to be the USC Psycho tailgate. That was the first time I ever went there. We tailgated. Everyone's getting hyped up. Then the game starts. It's not looking great. Obviously, I'm in the USC section, front row behind the goalpost in the end zone. But it was still just really nerve-wracking, too, considering just UCLA got ahead. Then, obviously, it felt like, is the defense going to collapse? What's going to happen here? But then USC just turned it around and just eventually just quieted down, shut up all those UCLA fans. And then just at the end, just being there to celebrate with the team. They came over. We just singing like Tusk and all the other fight songs for like a while, and then before just celebrating through the parking lot, through the golf course, back to the car, just celebrating the whole time, and then clinching that spot in the Pac-12 championship game that year. It was just so thrilling for just what was on the line, and just it kept that belief. Like even though it was Riley's first year and everyone's realistically thinking we're probably not going to win a title, it just made that belief seem so real for just those next few weeks until USC eventually would lose to Utah after Caleb Williams got hurt. But just really just the belief that sparked and just everything that was happening that year just made it so exciting. It's just a memory I'll just never forget. It might be my favorite game still to this day I've ever been to.
All right. And how about the games that family members, friends, older generations have told you about in USC, UCLA football history?
I think some of those ones you were mentioning, I think a lot of the games like OJ Simpson was at, I think obviously like some of those winners that I think Bob was talking about, Carson Palmer one, I kind of hear a lot about because in 2002, because every football game, I always wear his number 3 jersey to game. So I think that one, I hear a lot about that one and everything that happened when he was there. Then I think obviously some of the big wins, obviously, what was the Clay Helton year? I still remember that one against Penn State. I remember watching that one on TV. So just really, I mean, well, I don't obviously can't say I can keep track of exactly which ones. Just obviously hearing from different people is just still kind of cool to hear about. Even my grandfather, who actually was a basketball coach at USC, still just has some fond memories about some of those games. So it's just really just, well, I don't exactly, Matt, have like specific like games that come to mind. Just hearing just people talk about it is just really cool, especially like just being part of that Trojan family is just something that's just like hearing people share about what that game means to them is just really special.
Yeah. So, if you talk to 100 USC and UCLA fans, you bring them in a room, you ask them what's the greatest USC UCLA game, everyone's going to say 1967. And for the younger fans in the crowd, that was number 1 versus number 4. So they were both in the top 4. Winner was going to go to the Rose Bowl. And interestingly, that was the only year that Indiana has ever been to the Rose Bowl. And so it's interesting that this year, with Indiana now prominent in college football, 1967 was the one time that Indiana got through the Rose Bowl. USC beat Indiana in the Rose Bowl after beating UCLA to win the national championship. That was John McKay's second one. So that 67 USC UCLA game, it was a mountaintop moment, and you had UCLA's only Heisman Trophy winner, quarterback Gary Beeben, in that game. So UCLA had Gary Beeben as the Heisman Trophy winner in 67, and then you had OJ winning the Heisman his next year in 1968. So that was a golden age for USC and UCLA football. Both programs were great at the same time. It's something that we haven't had a whole lot in the past 20, 25 years. So that kind of puts the 1967 game in perspective. The other game that really stands out for me personally, not that I would remember it or I was there, but just as a historian, the 1976 and also 1977 games were really important in the larger course of this series, because John Robinson was, taking the torch from John McKay, and UCLA had a young coach named Terry Donahue who was trying to make his mark. And, one notable passage that just occurred, earlier this month was Kenny Easley, the NFL, the Pro Football Hall of Fame safety of the Seattle Seahawks, died at age 66. He went to UCLA, and Ronnie Lott, and this is true, Ronnie Lott, because he loved John Wooden, he was originally thinking he would go to UCLA. So imagine, it could have been Ronnie Lott and Kenny Easley in the same UCLA secondary for those 4 years from 1977 through 1980. And maybe the balance of power in Los Angeles college football would have been different if Ronnie Lott had become a Bruin instead of a Trojan. But here's what happened. Terry Donahue, who, again, was very young back then, he was in his 30s, he said, we don't play freshmen at UCLA. Ronnie Lott then went to John Robinson. Hey, whatever it takes. Like, if you can compete, if you can prove yourself, if you're good enough, of course we'll play freshmen. That's why Ronnie Lott pivoted from being a Bruin to a Trojan, and here we are all these many years later. So USC was able to take charge of the rivalry after John McKay left. John Robinson was able to, control that series against Terry Donahue and the Bruins. So that was the 76-77. So important for John Robinson to maintain control of the rivalry for USC against UCLA. And of course, USC had that great run in the late 1970s where it finished number 2 or number 1 in 3 of 4 years. Won the Rose Bowl in each of those 3 years that it finished in the top 2. Of course, won the 1978 national championship, beat Ohio State and an assistant coach named Pete Carroll in the 1980 Rose Bowl. So really the mid to late 1970s, a really important part of USC football history. USC, of course, has so many glorious periods in its history, but that one was really crucial. That, we've seen so many programs over the years. After a legend steps down, the program falls apart. Like Alabama was mediocre for like a decade after Bear Bryant died in 1982. We've seen Florida, after Urban Meyer. Florida's been mediocre for the past 15 years and is about to hire a new head coach. Will it be Lane Kiffin? So many prominent football schools, they crater. They fall into a ditch after the big guy, the legend, rides in a sunset. I mean, and USC's went through it with Pete Carroll. So that mid to late 1970s portion of the USC-UCLA rivalry, with the Trojans and John Robinson able to hold off Terry Donahue for several seasons, that to me is one of the more important parts of USC's football history. That, what John McKay did, John Robinson was able to keep going for several more years. A little bit of a lull under Ted Tollner in the mid 80s, but then Larry Smith comes aboard, and that brings us to 1988. 1988 was the other really big mountaintop level USC UCLA game. It's Rodney Peete against Troy Aikman, and USC wins that game, and it set up that 1 versus 2 USC Notre Dame in the Coliseum in 1988. It didn't go the Trojans' way, but just to play in one of those 1 versus 2 games at the end of the regular season, knowing that the winner is going to be playing for the national championship, another proud part of USC history, beating Troy Aikman and UCLA in 1988. So Crash, anything else you want to talk about in connection with this UCLA game that we haven't mentioned already, either what you're looking forward to on Saturday or other things about the past, other things about just the Los Angeles football culture? Maybe you can take us through like your tailgating or your game prep for UCLA this Saturday. Anything else you want to mention for us?
I can definitely take you down kind of what my pregame will sort of look like. Well, I don't have a clear idea. What's kind of cool about this tailgate in a way is you actually get more. There's actually way more UCLA fans who just come to this game. So it's kind of cool just be able to talk with them and just really get an idea of like what they're watching. Because obviously, while, we have to turn our TVs on, watch a little bit here and there, maybe see, obviously, like I got to see a bit of the last, like especially most of that second half of the Washington game, for example, but usually I don't get to see most of that. But what's kind of cool about it is then you can really ask UCLA fans like, hey, what should we be looking for? Like, what's like kind of the latest on Nico Iamaleava? Like, they might know something there. I mean, it sounds like he's day to day. I did read actually when Bob brought the question up, it sounds like he was a partial participant in practice, according to 247 Sports. Just kind of curious. So I like just briefly looking it up, but I think it really is kind of cool because you can just interact with them. And while you're not just talking trash on each other, you're also kind of being able to have like discussions about what's this game going to look like? What should I be looking for? Like, I think that's what's kind of cool about it, especially when a lot of UCLA students will come to tailgates. Like when I lived at the Surf House and we had a surf tailgate every year for this game, a lot of UCLA students, especially in their surf club, would pull up. So it'd be really fun to just talk about just the game and just why it's just so cool in that regard. And then obviously, like I said, I'm really hoping to see USC beat UCLA for the first time since I got to USC, beat them at the Coliseum and actually hold on to the victory belt and not have to, see it go away for a year. So I think those are kind of the things I'm really looking forward to, is just really talking with a lot of UCLA fans about what they think, and then being able to share my thoughts about the USC team this year. So really like getting to exchange ideas and just hear from UCLA fans is always I think a cool experience.
In terms of going through USC UCLA memories, the 1981 game, which we've referenced here, Norm Johnson has his kick blocked at the very end, and USC holds on. That was the year Marcus Allen won the Heisman Trophy, 1981. It was really John Robinson's last really, really great win as the USC head coach. But another thing about that 81 game, and it leads into the final segment of our show here, is that was the final game USC and UCLA played at the Coliseum annually. So in other words, they played every single year at the Coliseum for decades, through the 60s, the 70s, and through 1981. 1982 began UCLA's move to the Rose Bowl. So the 1982 USC UCLA game was played in the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena. And so 82 began the pattern, which has continued for over 40 years, of alternating between the Rose Bowl Stadium and the LA Coliseum each year. But 1978, 79, 80, 81 all played at the Coliseum. So it was an annual Coliseum game. And then in 1982, it changed. So we have the possibility that USC UCLA could be at SoFi Stadium in the near future. Crash, like, what would it feel like? And how many people have you talked to, USC friends, UCLA friends, about the possibility of having USC and UCLA in SoFi in the years when the Bruins host that game? What feedback have you received? What's just been the general response, the general mood of the people that you talk to about the future of USC UCLA football?
For sure, Matt. I think kind of my thoughts on it. I mean, I think it'd definitely be interesting to see that game there, but generally I'm pretty indifferent about it, given that as a USC fan, it really only affects me every other year. So I don't really think that as a USC fan, like, my opinion is very, warranted or even going to be wanted by the Bruin community. But that being said, though, I have talked to some people who are both opposed. Obviously, it seems like most beat reporters, especially out here on the West Coast, are very upset about it. But then a lot of other fans, too, seem like they're kind of sad. I think especially when you factor in that tailgating is a lot trickier at SoFi Stadium compared to the Rose Bowl. But then also just kind of it's the tradition of it, and just people love just that setting of it. But then I do think, and then people are saying, oh, once, and then at SoFi, people are worried, like, yeah, they can make more money, but you'll price more fans out. And then obviously, if you don't fix the product on the field, is that really going to solve the real problem of why you're moving to SoFi, thinking, oh, you'll get more fans based on the distance? But I've also talked to a lot of people back in my hometown here in Newport Beach. And one of them, who my family knows pretty well at our gym, he runs a gym we go to, he said that he went to UCLA and he kind of seems like he's not opposed to the move, just given that given where he's from, it's easier to get to Inglewood than Pasadena. It's a much further compared to going from where UCLA's campus is. But he's also a Chargers season ticket holder. Then one of my friends who goes to Indiana but grew up going to UCLA games with his grandfather, who's an alum, he's very upset about the move. I was like, asked him his thoughts, and I got a long paragraph, like took up almost my entire screen of how upset he was. And then we went back and forth saying like, hey, I'm just trying to, hear people's opinions on it. So it was really just interesting to hear what he said. What I was saying earlier about him being worried about people getting priced out and just the tailgating, all that was a lot of what he was telling me. So it's definitely really interesting to just hear what people at UC, especially like Bruin alums and fans and students, all think of the move. So really, it's definitely just an interesting thing that I'm sure will also be something I'll be talking to a lot of UCLA people about on Saturday.
Yeah, and Bob Springer asks next year. Well, we don't know, but the lawyer. This is the lawyers, the courts. Like that's where this battle is being fought with the city of Pasadena. We're going to see how it all shakes out. And by the way, UCLA has gone through an NIL scandal, and we would want to refer you to a website called FOIA Ball. So you can do the math there. There's a reporter who does FOIA requests and investigations based on that, and he dug into UCLA's NIL operation with James Washington, Bruins for Life, Shelter 37. Lots of questions about how well and how appropriately UCLA has been managing its NIL funds. So that's just another stain on UCLA athletic director Martin Jarman's legacy. And we've seen Los Angeles Times UCLA beat reporter Ben Bolch write a letter to UCLA Chancellor Julio Frank. Like, do you care about your program? Like, it's all about, the people who care about UCLA athletics want Martin Jarman gone. And yet it doesn't seem as though Julio Frank wants to kick out Jarman. But that's another drama that's part of the backdrop to all of this. And, one wonders how this might affect the litigation, all the court battles in which UCLA is immersed. But those court battles will determine whether or not SoFi Stadium hosts the USC-UCLA game next season. I would only add, as we wind down our show here at the USC channel and the Voice of College Football, that UCLA, you're not going to be able to put tarps over seats in SoFi. USC fans are going to grab all those seats at the ends of the stadium, in the end zones. It might technically be a UCLA home game if we go to SoFi, but trust me, there's going to be a majority of USC fans in that very big arena. So Bruins, you can run, but you can't hide if you go to SoFi.
Bob said it best in the comments just now. Bruins can fill the lower bowl, and SC fans will fill the rest.
There you go. And I think Bob's accurate. Bob's usually accurate, but he's very accurate in this case. All right, folks. So, Ethan is live blogging USC basketball because he needs to make some money before the holidays. We can all respect that. So we will be with you Sunday, 5 o'clock in Los Angeles to talk about this USC-UCLA game. And just want to be clear, Nico Iamaleava has not been officially ruled out. But I personally think it would be not just surprising, it would be irresponsible of UCLA to throw him back onto the field instead of looking out for his health. Because he's been repeatedly dinged up this season. It would be a bad look in my mind for an interim coaching staff coaching its last game. This is it for Tim Skipper and Jerry Neuheisel. They're not going to be retained. I would be not just shocked, but also aghast if UCLA, thinks that it can treat Nico Iamaleava like a piece of meat and put him back on the field. It would not be the appropriate thing to do. But we'll see. Maybe Nico plays. And maybe in that case, UCLA has a little bit of a puncher's chance. But man, I just think it would not be the right thing to do. And some Bruin fans, if you're watching, look, I'm thinking about Nico Iamaleava's health. This is not a game that USC needs to get into the playoff. That dream's dead. So it's not. I'm not thinking about this of, oh, whatever helps USC. No, not going there. Like, I follow UCLA, and I'm concerned for Nico Iamaleava's well-being. I think it would be very irresponsible if UCLA plays him in this game. Keep in mind, with Deshaun Foster being fired and now an interim coaching staff playing out the string, finishing out the season, just like there's no incentive to risk Iamaleava's health. Like, if he's going to stay at UCLA, preserving his health is the way to do that. Like, I'm sure that the Iamaleava family is thinking, no, we don't need Nico to play this one extra game. We need him to get healthy, and then we'll make a decision about whether he transfers out of UCLA and enters the portal, or whether he stays with the new head coach that UCLA is about to hire. So anyway, Sunday, 5 o'clock in Los Angeles, we talk about the Victory Bell. We talk about USC, UCLA, final regular season game of the year. And then, of course, we'll continue on with our Tuesday shows. And the other reminder, we're going to do a bonus segment with Cody Kessler. So if you want to become a member at the middle Heisman tier, the top national champion tier, you'll be able to get access to that and all the other bonus segments that Crashlet Collier, Ethan Inman, and myself, Matt Zemek, provide. So for Crash, this is Matt. Thanks for watching. Happy Thanksgiving. Beat the Bruins. We'll see you Sunday for our UCLA review show here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. Fight on.